Today we're going to be walking you through every menu in the Sony a6600 and how to optimize this camera for video. Let's jump right in. So you want to start by selecting the menu button on your camera, and you want to also make sure that your camera is set to the movie dial at the top of your camera. When you have that set up, let's go into the menu. If you're coming from a brand like Canon, then this menu system will be very familiar to you. This first one is set up as primarily photo-based settings. This second one is mostly going to be your video-based settings and autofocus. This next one is going to deal with networks or anything dealing with your Wi-Fi. This playback area is dealing with your reviewing your photos or your videos. This toolbox is going to be your setup menu. And then you have the My menu, which is your custom menu that you can set up to quickly access anything that you want. Now, some of these settings we're going to skip through if they are something that we don't necessarily need to change or that won't impact our video settings, but I'll cover some of the things that I like to do when it comes to photos for thumbnails or what have you, and just some of those base settings. But if we skip past something, just know that it's not essential when it comes to video usage. So the file format is primarily going to be something that's for photos. If you do prefer raw photos that can be edited, then you want to select that. But for my purposes, those are set to JPEG. We have the quality for photos, fine, and then the large as far as that when it comes to the 20 megapixels as far as the photo-based settings. But you can select menu, hit the back button. The aspect ratio is going to be 16:9 so that it comes out that traditional frame that you see YouTube videos in. That's at 16:9 framing. Long exposure set to on, high ISO set to normal. These are pretty much standard out of the box. Page number 2, you see this as sRGB. You leave that alone. We don't need to adjust anything here. Page number 3, there's not a ton of anything that we would need, but later on, potentially in future videos, you'll see interview shoot function as well as the memory recall and this memory button. These will be important, but for right now they aren't. So let's move to page number 4. Register custom shoot settings. You can register and set your recall and stuff. This is not anything that we're going to do right now. Let's move on to page number 5. This is something that you will want to deal with because the AF1, we're now into autofocus modes. And so right now the camera is set to manual focus, but you can set that to autofocus on your camera. I have my priority for autofocus single and continuous, which is that AFS and AFC, to balanced emphasis between these options versus the other ones available. When it comes to the focus area for video, I have this set to wide. As far as the focus area limit, these are multiple options of things that you want or could use in video. I leave all of these available. If you want to deselect these and keep these to the ones that you may come across and use more often, then you can. I just prefer to leave these set to as it is here. So we're not going to change anything there. And switch VH AF area, I leave this set to off. Page 6. Autofocus illuminator, I have this set to auto. Face and eye autofocus set. Now this is something that you will want to make sure that you enable. Face and eye priority and autofocus is set to on, and you do have the ability to have eye autofocus in video for human or for animals. And because primarily doing video for humans, it's set to human. Whether or not it selects the right or the left eye, I have that set to auto because I'm not specific or particular on that. Face and eye frame display so that it shows the box so that you know if it's focusing on the face or the eye or what have you. That's set to on. Animal eye display is to say when I change that over to a subject detection for animal, if I want that to be showing the display, then the answer would be yes. So that's set to on. Hit the menu button to go backwards, and you can do autofocus area registration where it will show you the autofocus box. For our purposes, this is set to off. Page 7, these are the selected areas. You pretty much, as you see things here on the screen, nothing is going to be changed here. This should be pretty standard. And let's move on to page number 8. Page number 8 now gets into your exposure. And so when it comes to ISO setting, I do have my ISO set to the highest range of 102,400 when it comes to the ISO. And then the ISO here is telling you what your current ISO settings are in your camera. So there's nothing to change really here, but I do like to make sure that that is maxed. Metering mode is set to multi as far as the different ones. For my purposes when it comes to video, that's what I prefer. You hit the face priority and multi-metering set to on. Spot exposure point, I have that set to center. An exposure step, I do prefer this to do this in increments of 0.3 exposure value instead of 0.5. That way I can make smaller incremental exposure changes with the ISO versus larger steps. Let's move on to page 9. Page 9 is saying exposure is auto exposure lock with the shutter. I have this set to auto. And exposure standard adjust, I don't have anything specific set for this. So this is all we need. We don't need to change anything. Let's move on to page 10. Flash on the camera, or if you were to enable flash rather with an external one, these are more photo based things, nothing that we need to change here. Let's move on to page 11. Page 11 is important because this is what is going to deal with your white balance. This first option here is going to let you know what your camera is currently set at. Switch to whatever it is specifically that you use. I have mine custom set for my specific home office. So you will see that set to that custom one. You can choose any one that you want. I prefer when I'm doing priority set in the auto white balance, you can do standard and ambience, or an ambience with the priority of white. Standard works fine for my purposes on the camera, but whatever you choose is your preference. Let's go to picture effect. This is more or less going to be your creative style. So these toy normal pops and stuff like that, because there's nothing on the screen. You aren't seeing any examples of this, but these are some of the more quote unquote fun things that are available in the camera, but there's nothing that's available here. So we'll leave that set to off. Picture profile is going to be specific to getting into color grading and things like that. When you set this to off, then it now goes into your standard picture profile mode, or standard creative mode rather. But for my purposes, I have mine set to picture profile 1, which is a custom one that I have. But otherwise, you can leave that set to off if you're new to video and you don't have anything that you want to change. Page 12, shutter auto white balance lock. I have this currently set to off. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so page 13, this is going to deal with focus assistance as far as being manual focus or what have you. And so before we get into the focus magnifier, I have the limit set to no limit because I don't want it to be timed if I'm trying to manually focus on something. And it will time out at 2 or 5 seconds. So I have mine set to no limit. So I would personally select when I want that magnification to go away. Whether or not it's at a 1x crop or 5.9, then it will cut in so you can see more clearly if you decide you want to. For me, 1.0 is good enough. And what that means is that if I want to focus on something, you can move this box around on your camera so that you can adjust as you need to. And what I'll do is, let's say I want to focus on this device, I'll hit the center button to select that. And then I can adjust my focus on the camera until I get what I want to be in focus or not, and make sure that it's good. Hit the center button to exit out, and that's that focus magnification. With the eye autofocus and face autofocus, you rarely would need to use this, but I do prefer to have these settings for that setup. As far as everything else on this page, the AF in focus magnification, that is set to on. Manual focus assist is set to off. Peaking settings, I do have that set to on. If you ever do need to do manual focus, I prefer to change the color based on whatever I need. So if I'm focusing on something and I'm in a green area, I'll pick something that's more contrasty and won't blend in. So I may pick red or something like that. But for now, we don't need those. And most of the time you may not, but these are the settings for this. Page 14 of 14, face registration. You can do this. Some of these are grayed out because I'm connected via HDMI to showcase these settings, but you can register your face by going to register faces priority. So it will prioritize your face or the faces that are registered in your camera versus others, as well as the self-portrait and timer. These are the settings here. These are more photo-based things, but you can do that and that still will help you in video. But for my purposes, I have that set to on. This is a personal preference if you want to use it or not. So the second tab is now going to start getting into some of the video-based settings. Right now, currently, I have this set to manual exposure, and these different settings is going to be your shutter priority, aperture priority, as well as the program auto, specifically when it comes to video, whereas the ones on the top dial are more or less going to be for photography based settings. So if you ever want to go into shutter priority or aperture priority, this is one way that you can do that. I prefer to be fully in manual as far as the exposure, and this is the way that you can have that set. So we'll go and hit menu and go back. As far as the S and Q, the slow and quick, that's a setting that's grayed out. We're not going to change anything with that. File format, if you want to choose HD or 4K, this is a personal preference. Don't ever really want to choose AVC HDD. So if you're doing a regular HD 1080p video, you want to select that. 4K, you want to go that route when you are doing 4K video. As far as your record setting, this is specifically going to reference your frames per second. So I prefer to shoot 4K, 24 frames per second. Currently, this camera is set to 1080p based on maybe what you might need to do, but you can adjust this at any point. And if anytime I'm using 30 or 60 frames per second, I'm always going to pick that higher megabits per second to get the higher quality data out for those video files. But for our purposes, it's set to 24. You can set it to whatever you choose at that point. The S&Q settings are going to be specific if you want to do slow motion or if you want to do a time lapse and quickly adjust that at the top dial. These are more or less photo-based settings. However, when you use S&Q, these will be video-based settings. It'll bake it in and you won't have to do any post-processing. And so depending on what you want, you can pick 24, 30, 60, or what have you, as far as your frame rate or record setting for what you're doing when it comes to slow motion and whatnot. The lower that this number is, you can see if we go all the way down to 1, it'll say quick motion. So at that point, you're getting into doing time lapse. If you go up to, let's say, 120 frames per second, now we're getting into slow motion. So if you ever don't know what to pick, but you want to do a time lapse or slow motion, you literally can pick something here and it will tell you if it's going to be slow motion at the bottom of the screen there, or if it's going to be something that is a time lapse. I often use time lapse for my Being a Creator series in videos. So that's usually what I use. Proxy recording is something that, as I'm going through my camera now, I do want to set to on, and this will record 720p files in the camera. So if you ever want to link this in for editing, especially with 4K video, you can always work with the proxy files first. If you don't know anything about it, you're just new to video and all that, you can leave this set to off because that's just going to fill up your memory card a little bit faster. If you are doing extra video work, you may want to leave this set to on. Let's go to page 2. Autofocus drive speed is set to normal. Some people prefer to set this to fast, but I found that the Sony menus are blazing fast. I don't have any issues with that. Autofocus tracking sensitivity is also set to standard, or you can have this set to responsive. For my personal preferences, normal and standard work for these two here. Auto slow shutter is set to on. Initial focus magnification, again here, set to 1.0. Audio recording is set to on. If you do not have this on, you will not have audio enabled on your camera. Audio record levels are going to be specific to what your camera does. If I'm using something that's baked into the camera, as far as the lapel microphone, I would increase that. If I'm using something like the Rode Wireless Go 2s, then I would set this to like 1 or 3, whatever the strength is that I would need. So this is where you adjust your audio levels to pick up whatever it is that you would need, but you never want to go really past that 12 or negative 12 decibels, somewhere thereabout for whatever your audio settings would be. So somewhere about here, as far as the green bars, not the audio levels here, because this is just the onboard microphone, but you want to set that based on your microphone settings, but this is where you would adjust that. Page 3, audio level display. I do want this on so that I can actively see my audio meters on the camera screen. Audio out timing, I have this set to live, or you can have this set to lip sync. For me, just leave it set to live. When noise reduction is set to off, you want to handle your audio in real time. You don't want to let the camera try to process any of that. Marker display is set to off. Marker settings we're not going to go into. And the movie with the shutter button is set to on so that I can press that shutter button on my camera to start recording, and you're not beholden to the little record button on the side of the camera. Here on page 4 is now going to go into shutter as well as steady shot, because the camera does have in-body image stabilization. Electronic front curtain shutter, I have this set to on. Release without the lens, for me personally, is enabled, and this is mostly handy if you have any manual lenses that do not have electronics. You want to have this enabled for that. Release without the memory card, I have this disabled. I never want my camera to, or even trick me potentially that it's recording or something. I just want that message to pop up. So release without the card is set to disable. Steady shot to activate your IBIS in your camera is set to on. If at any time you're using a gimbal, and you want to solely rely off the gimbal, then you want to maybe turn that off. Steady shot settings, I have this currently set to auto versus manual. And then steady shot focal length is only if you're using a manual focus lens that has no stabilization, has no electronics in it. Then you want to go in here and play around with these settings. But for our purposes, most of your lenses probably won't have that. So let's move on to the next page. This is one of my favorite settings to use. This is going to be the zoom feature, and this is going to be that Sony clear image zoom that I've so incredibly talked about a ton on the channel. And so this is what I really enjoy. To activate that, you want to go to zoom settings, and you don't want to just use optical zoom only or digital zoom. I love the clear image zoom. I can't get enough. It crops in on the sensor versus a digital zoom. So that's where that's activated. Zoom ring rotation is only something that may come available on certain lenses that you use, but for our purposes, we're moving on to the next page. Okay, here on this page for display button, there's nothing that we're selecting here. As far as the monitor, you can adjust this depending on what you want to see on the screen. For me personally, there are some things I do not need, like this graphic display. I don't need that. I do prefer to have a display with all of the info, all of the settings, especially when I'm using video, so I can see what the auto exposure mode is if it's set, so I can see what the white balance is set to, autofocus, manual focus, and so on. I'd also have one that says no display info when I'm trying to completely see the screen. If you want to get into histograms and seeing that, you can activate that for my purposes. Most of the time I don't need that. As far as the leveler, internal leveler is super helpful for me personally. For the viewfinder, I don't have this activated. This is a screen that I never use, and the monitor off is also disabled. So I only actively use these three in my camera. You could choose what you prefer when you're using video in yours. For the finder, I have level set, histogram, and no display info. So this is when you're looking through the viewfinder. These are the things that I most want to see. So if I ever need it, then I'm looking for other things available, but you can choose to use whatever you prefer. So when we exit out of the display button and we go down to finder frame rate, that's set to standard. The zebra, if that was something that you ever wanted to use, zebra settings, then this is where you would activate that. I have mine currently set to off. The grid line for the rule of thirds, this is what I prefer. A lot of people, if they're getting into more professional video work, may choose a different option, but I really prefer and enjoy the rule of thirds. Exposure set guide, you could set this to on. For me and my purposes, it's set to off. The next page here, there's nothing that we want to adjust as far as the live view display or the auto review. So let's move on to page 8. Page 8 is one that I do spend some time making adjustments because this is your custom operation. And based on these three icons will dictate what your custom keys or quick functions are set to. For this first one here, the reason why you see custom key 3 times is because this one is for photos, this one is for video, and this one is for playback. So you can get 3 different variations of things that you see when you are set to your custom key in a photo mode versus a video mode, because you may need different tools for photography than you would need for your video work. To go over really quickly what I have available in the photo modes, it's going to be very representative with some maybe minor changes when we get to video. The autofocus switch works in the up or down position, and that button can register for multiple things. Currently it's set to autofocus, manual focus toggle, so I can switch between autofocus or manual focus. The zoom, when it's flicked down and I press that button, is going to activate clear image zoom. Recall custom hold 1, again, is something that I use. Finder, monitor selection down here for this other button. And then if we go over to page 2 here, these are pretty much standard for what you would see in your camera. I don't change anything here. Page 3, I do have the front button number 1 set to white balance, and the second one set to the focus mode when I'm specifically doing anything photo related. And the third thing is if your lens has a button on it, and what do you want to set that button to do? And it's depending on the lens that you're using if this is something that you set. So here we have this next custom key, which will be for video. So this is going to be very different and specific to how I personally use my camera. The first toggle here is going to be autofocus, manual focus, to be able to switch that with that button. When selected into the down position, it goes into clear image zoom. When I hit this other custom button that's set as number 3 or C3 on your camera, I have that set to the focus magnification or focus magnifier. And when I select this bottom trash can icon, the C4, it's going to select the finder or the monitor select, which basically means the screen will go black and your views will switch to using the little eyepiece, and you can swap between the two. And this is handy when I need to minimize the light or anything, or just quickly switch to the viewfinder. On this next page, whenever you see follow custom and then you see that photo icon, that's just telling the camera to do whatever it is already set when it's set for photos. So I don't have anything changed there. However, I do have number 2 and 4 changed. Number 2 is set to auto white balance lock toggle. So if the white balance, if I'm vlogging, is set to automatic white balance, and I find a good way or a good something that I want that set to, I'll have the camera lock it at that certain specific exposure. The other thing is the auto exposure lock. So if the ISO, again, in vlogging, for example, if it's set to auto and I discover that whatever that current setting is good and I want to lock that in, I can hit the down directional button and it will lock that. And so what that looks like is, if we go over here to the camera, currently the ISO is set to 250 based off of the last time that I use it. But if I go and move that to auto and select enter, then that's dealing with the exposure. So that will vary depending on what I point to. The other thing that I want to adjust on my camera is, I'm saying automatic white balance. Right now it's currently set to a specific number. Let's change that to AWB so that both of those are in auto. So what this means is when I select that left directional button, you see that AWB that's selected in the left, whatever the white balance currently is set, even though it's moving in auto, it's locked in now. So no matter where I go or what I do, it's locked at the current setting. If I decide I go into a different environment and I want this to change, I can unlock this by selecting that button again. However, same thing goes with the ISO. If I decide that whatever the camera currently has it exposed to, and I want to leave that the same, I can press that down directional button and that star pulls up to let me know the exposure is now locked and will not adjust. Even though it was set to auto, I can temporarily lock that for the duration of the camera. And you can turn on both. And if you have your auto white balance locked and your exposure locked, then you will see the icon that you see in the bottom right of the screen. So for example, as you can see right now, I have a light that's just over there, but the exposure did not change because of the way that I have that set. Now, if I adjust that and adjust the auto white balance, then I can turn some of this stuff off and you'll see that change and expose for that light or expose for the light back there. And you see those subtle shifts in the white balance versus when I come back to myself. You can see the skin coloration is starting to adjust as it readjusts for the white balance and exposure. But if I wanted to lock either of those, I could do so. And now it's locked. So this next one for the custom key for playback mode, there's not a ton here for you to select through, but you can have it against whatever the settings are in photo or video. Follow that. I have mine set to follow whatever those custom settings are. And then the second button here, which is your function button on your camera, I have this set to send to my smartphone because a lot of times I may have a video clip or a photo that I want to transfer from my camera to my phone, and I can do that in the app, and that's what I have set there. If you go to page 2 of 2, I have this also set to follow whatever the custom settings are, so nothing specific on this one. The next thing is going to be the function menu setting. This is going to be specific to your needs. I can show you what I personally prefer to use. When I'm in movie mode, this focus area is going to be the ones that we could choose from before. That's what I have it set to, which is the wide. So I have access to choose between those. To choose between the subject detection of an animal or for a human, I have this selected here. For me to adjust my picture profiles, I have this also set. The WB for white balance, exposure compensation, depending on what settings that I'm using or switching to. The S and Q, this is something I want to quickly access as well. And creative style is going to be the difference between going through standard and some other options like neutral that your camera has available. We'll take a look at that in just a second. And then interval shooting is if you want to do more traditional style time lapse, where it's actually the actual photos that you would then need to render in editing. RAW or JPEG, this is something I want to be able to quickly access. The mode, the shoot mode, if I want to quickly access that. And then silent shooting, if you're ever in a scenario, or I'm in a scenario where I want to take pictures, maybe I want to take a lot, but I don't want the camera to make any noise. I want to be able to activate that. So that's currently what I have those set to. So if we go back to the camera and I hit that FN function button, then you can see in movie mode, these are the only things that are available, the things that are most important, which is that focus area between all those different ones that we had available. And so that's what I prefer to use. And then we have the subject detection between human and animal, picture profile, the white balance. We have the frame rate for the S and Q. And then we also have the exposure mode, which takes us through the different ones that you may want to use when it comes to video. If you go to a photo-based mode, right now I switched the camera to M for the manual mode. And if I hit that function button, now you'll see those other photo-based options became available, like the silent shooting, switching between the interval shooting for time-lapse, more traditional time-lapse, file format when it comes to JPEG or RAW. Auto exposure is still if I wanted to, or excuse me, the white balance, picture profile, subject detection, as well as focus area. So depending on what I want, I have a good range between different video features or photo features in my quick menu. But if you ever want to change any of these, you would just select what you want and then swap it there. The My Dial settings, I don't have this set to anything particular. You can change how you want the click wheel or scroll wheel or the top dial to work. Currently, I don't have anything specifically set for this, so we'll leave this alone. The dial or the wheel setup, I have my shutter set for when I'm adjusting through the quick wheel, and the aperture set for, which is that AV, set at that very top right dial on the front of your camera. So what that looks like is as I adjust the click wheel on the back, you can see the shutter is changing. And so anytime I spin that wheel, I know that I can quickly adjust my shutter. And anytime that I adjust that fully black dial at the top right, I know I can adjust my aperture however I may need or want to on my camera. Page 9, we have this AV TV rotate. I leave this set to normal. This is not anything that I changed. Dial wheel exposure, value compensation, I have this set to off. The movie button, I have it set to always enabled, always on. I don't want to change anything. Dial wheel lock, I have that set to unlock. And audio signals is so that your camera doesn't make chimes and noises when you start or stop recording. I prefer when I'm starting or stopping recording the camera not to make any noise. If you prefer that, you can leave this set to on. When it comes to your network settings and send it to your computer or smartphone or control with your smartphone, have to be a dedicated video on going into how to connect it with your smartphone, but this is where you would go in and select those options. For our purposes, we're going to skip these network settings, so this is something specific that you need to do connecting with your phone. The playback menu is not anything that needs to be changed or anything that needs to be adjusted. This is still set up, still out of the box. There's nothing in the playback menu, so we'll move on to the toolbox. The setup menu is something that you do want to make a few changes to. We have 7 pages here. The first one is the Gamma Display Assist is set to auto. If you're ever using any kind of log footage or anything like that, this is so that it can help you. So if you ever put your camera in log, then you can have it convert to Rec 709. If all of this sounds not familiar to you and you don't know what any of this stuff is, don't worry about it. You can set it to auto if you ever decide you want to get into that kind of stuff, or you can just leave it set to off if you prefer. I leave mine set to auto for now. The volume settings is going to be respective to when you're listening to audio back in the camera. You can always adjust this in playback or have it set to a setting specific. I prefer to leave mine turned all the way up, and you can adjust it again as you're reviewing footage. Delete confirmation. Having that set to cancel first or delete first is just going to say where do you want that video or audio to default to. So what that looks like is when you hit the playback feature on your camera and you decide that you're going to delete something, it will auto select. Do you want it to auto select delete first, or cancel first. So that I don't accidentally delete anything, I always select cancel first so I don't have any issues with accidentally removing features that I want to keep. So if we go back in here through our camera, it's up to you, whatever you decide. I prefer cancel first. Page 2 of 7, display quality, I have this set to high. Power save start time, I have this set to 30 minutes. If I'm not using my camera, if it is not being used or no buttons are pressed within 30 minutes, the camera will go to sleep, and that's helpful when conserving battery. This will not happen if you are connected via HDMI, for example. The camera will stay awake. The auto power off temperature, I have this set to high, and this keeps the camera from signaling any early warnings about overheating. The cameras don't overheat, these newer ones for Sony, and so you could just leave that set to high and that will work perfectly. NTSC or PAL selector, if you're in the United States, this will automatically be set to NTSC. If you select it and you're already in NTSC, it'll ask you, do you want to change to PAL? You do want to use this setting if you ever travel abroad, and so that you don't have, when you walk indoors, a bunch of black lines that look like they're rolling in the background across the lights. You want to change that to PAL. That's only when traveling. Very rarely will you ever touch this, so you probably want to just leave this alone. Cleaning mode, you can do where it cleans the center a little bit there if you decide that you choose to. Again, that's just something specific there. Touch operation, you do want to select this to on. So if you want to do touch tracking, you can enable that. Page 3, the touch panel and pad. I have this selected to both of these instead of just one or the other. Touchpad settings, nothing changed here that I'm adjusting. This is more or less when you put the eyepiece up to your eye and being able to touch the screen to readjust the focusing points. It's not anything that I use, but this is something, those are the settings that I have. Time code UV settings, not anything that we're going to get into. IR remote, so if you're using the Sony remote for this camera, then you want to select this to on. If not, you can leave this set to off. HDMI settings, for the nature of this video, it is currently set to the HDMI info display is set to on. However, if you want to have that clean look of HDMI with no icons on the screen, yours should be set to off. But because I use mine back and forth for tutorial purposes such as this, then it's currently set to on. Time code output is currently set to off. That's something a little bit more advanced we're not going to cover in this video. Control for HDMI currently set to on. Again, my stuff is a little different simply because of tutorial based content that I make, but your HDMI info display should be set to off. And whether or not you do 60 or 24 is a preference. I have mine set to 60. And for your HDMI resolution, you can do a higher quality resolution. Again, just for the purposes of this video, it's currently set to 1080p, but you can select it to be higher if you prefer. Hitting that menu back button, if we go back, we're going to proceed on to page 4. And the 4K output select is currently disabled. Some of these settings are disabled because I'm connected via HDMI. USB connection currently set to PC remote. In the other settings, as you see on screen, nothing additional to change here. Let's move on to page 5. Date and time setup, area setting, copyright information. You do want to put your details in there. Format is to clean the card off completely. You do want to do that every time you're putting in a new or re-cleaning a card. You don't want to delete that off the computer. And this is where you would go to format your memory card. File number, set the file name, not anything specific here. Let's move on to page 6. The new folder name or recover image DB and all this extra other stuff. Nothing that we need to change here. Let's move on to page 7. Settings reset is not anything that we need to change. The last menu that we have here to go through is the My Menu. What is available or seen on your My Menu is a personal choice. I like to have things that I readily access on a regular basis. So the first of those being my memory recall. And to set the memory, again, a future video will discuss what those are, but I have those set and these are personal. You can add or move or adjust whatever it is that you want or use most often. I also have the picture effect that is currently set to off, but again, depending on what you want or would prefer to do, you have the toy normal, you have the pop, which even if you adjusted that, you could play around with the different variations of what's available there. You have the pop color, you have where the posterization color, and you can play around with those different things. Little fun effects that the camera can do that you may not be aware of. And sometimes, depending on what the goal is, I may choose to do something where it picks a specific image or what have you. And so that's just something for fun. It's up to you what you want to do and how you use these. But for me, it's currently set to off, but I do want that available just in the odd case that I decide to use it. Priority set in the auto white balance, something I do occasionally may change. Currently it's set to standard. S&Q settings, the format. My page 2 is my file formats to choose between HD and 4K or 24, 30, 124 images per second or what have you. Interval shoot function, all of these different things that you see here. My page 3 is set to the manual exposure, what have you, even though that's set as also in my quick menu when I select the function button. These are the things that I have here as well. And because I do a lot between showing the HDMI settings, I have that set to here. That may be something that you don't need. And then the white balance, again, is something that's set there, as well as the zebra settings. Page 4, or your last page, however many it is that you create, your My menu is specific to you specifically. If you want to add an item, you would select Add an Item, go through all of the different things that your camera has available. You would select that item, and then you can decide what page you want to put that on. If you want to sort and rearrange things, you can, or delete an item, or delete a page, or delete all the things that you have in your My menu. And that's pretty much it when it comes to that My menu page. So the Sony menu systems are very vast and in-depth. And the next thing that I would love to show you is how that memory recall works in your camera. This is something that you absolutely can use, that and clear image zoom. If this is a feature that your camera has and you're not leveraging it, I'm going to show you in the next 2 videos why you absolutely want to take advantage of that.